Thank you, Chip. To everyone on the line, thank you for joining us this morning for the Battle of the Buildings, Central Florida Battle of the Buildings webinar series. My name is Chris Castro. I'm the Director of Sustainability here at the City of Orlando. And for those just getting caught up, the Central Florida Battle of the Buildings is a voluntary, fun competition to help commercial building owners and managers across Central Florida reduce energy and water consumption, as well as divert their waste from the landfill at their own facilities. We've been fortunate to partner with the EPA Energy Star program as a partner of the Central Florida Battle of the Buildings competition, and all participants will be receiving recognition for their efforts. We are looking to provide awards to those given for the greatest reduction in over 16 categories listed, and we will be providing some updates about that here shortly. Today's webinar will focus on energy conservation, and we have two subject matter experts who will be on the line walking us through low and no cost opportunities for you to really focus on the energy side of things. If we can advance our slide. So as mentioned, this is our introduction to our competition here, and for those who are on the line and haven't signed up to the Battle of the Buildings, we still have an opening until the end of the month. July 31st is the last date to register, and you can register at the website cfbotb.org, again cfbotb.org for the acronym of the Central Florida Battle of the Buildings. Please advance. The categories that will be essentially competing are as follows. There's 16 various categories. Each one of them has different size thresholds as well. So if you're a large or a small commercial building, there are categories for that. Large and small public assembly, restaurants, hotels, retail, medical offices, mixed use, and multifamily. And this challenge will run from July 1st through the end of the year, December 31st. And winners will be essentially awarded based on the greatest percentage reduced compared to the baseline of July 2016 to July 2017. So there will be a requirement to put 12 months of utility bills prior to this July 1st, and then showing the reduction over the course of the next 6 months. Please advance. We also want to thank, of course, our battle sponsors who make this entire challenge completely possible. So, of course, thanks to the City of Orlando, BOMA, the Building Owners and Managers Association, OUC, the Reliable One, USGBC Central Florida and the Florida chapter, Duke Energy and the University of Central Florida come in at silver sponsorships. Our green sponsors are the Apartment Association of Greater Orlando, TLC Engineering for Architecture, Heal Interiors, and 15 Light Years. And the bronze sponsors came in at with Search Aircon Technologies, Daya Distribution, EcoBuilt Strategies, and the City of Winter Park. Each one of these sponsors have helped to assist our Energy Specialist Training Program, as well as provide the necessary funding to carry out these webinars, the technical support, and the various events that we'll be hosting throughout this challenge. So a big thank you to those battle sponsors. And if you're out there and still interested in being a sponsor, we are certainly accepting sponsorship throughout the battle. Please advance. This is a part of this effort is a collaboration also with the University of Central Florida. And we felt that there was an opportunity to train the next generation of energy professionals at UCF, and launched what's called the Energy Specialist Training Program. This is an opportunity for you as a building participant of this challenge to get technical support and assistance from a free energy specialist, students who are trained in the Energy Star Portfolio Manager tool, as well as trained in basic energy, water, and waste conservation strategies throughout the entire process. So if you haven't ever used Portfolio Manager, gone through the data entry and data collection process, or even walked through your facility to identify ways to save energy, we have an opportunity to register and seek support from an energy specialist. And you can do so by, again, approaching us on our website and visiting cfbotb.org Right now we have 20 energy specialists who have gone through this training in a wide variety of different disciplines, and we're very excited to be, again, giving these students real-world experience, as well as you all as participants, free technical support and consulting, in addition to what's provided by the US EPA Energy Star program. Moving forward. So I'll turn this over now to our guest speakers, who will be walking us essentially through this whole slide. We're very fortunate to have a colleague of mine, Ian Lahiff, who's the Energy Project Manager for the City of Orlando, as well as Dan Lewis with the TLC Engineering for Architecture, who will be talking more about ways in which we can save energy in our buildings. So fellows, please take it away.
Good morning, guys. My name is Dan Lewis. Like Chris said, I work for TLC Engineering. I'm a graduate engineer here in our Energy Services Department.
And my name is Ian Lahiff. I'm a licensed mechanical engineer and the energy manager for the City of Orlando. I'm also a lead accredited professional, and my job is to go through the city's stock of varied buildings and identify and implement ways to save energy.
So I'm going to take you guys into this presentation. So why focus on buildings and plants? Buildings and plants use a lot of energy, but they don't have to. The average building wastes 30% of the energy it consumes because of inefficiencies. So I'm going to start by getting some energy efficient technologies. We're going to start with smart meters, which can do things such as display home energy use, and they allow you to adjust your thermostat or turn appliances on or off remotely. Lighting can save you a lot of energy if you use LED bulbs. LED bulbs have lower energy usage, and they'll save money over time through lower energy costs. You can also have programmable thermostats, which you can put on a schedule to have your thermostat work less hard when the building is not occupied. You can also have occupancy sensors, which are used for adjusting lighting. So when the space is occupied, you obviously want lights on, but when people leave the room, oftentimes people leave lights on. So with occupancy sensors, this allows the lights to turn off automatically. You can also have Energy Star appliances. The purpose of Energy Star appliances are they save energy without sacrificing features or functionality. They're seen in appliances such as clothes washers, dryers, water heaters, refrigerators, and freezers. So there are many ways to save money through energy efficiency. During summer, the farther you cool your space, the more energy you're using. So if you set your thermostat to a higher temperature, then your air conditioning system doesn't have to work as hard. Also, if the space is not occupied, then you could greatly save energy by having your thermostat set to a temperature that is much warmer or closer to the outside temperature than what the space usually likes to be occupied.
Yeah, that's a really good point. One of the things that we do with some of the buildings that I work on is we have setbacks, or instead of totally turning off the air conditioning system when the building or the space is not occupied, you set it back a few degrees warmer, so it's creeping up for several hours until that building is reoccupied, and then it can come back down to the desired set point.
Right, and this takes place in both summer and winter. In the winter, obviously, we keep the temperatures in the spaces cooler. Mm-hmm. Now, your HVAC system blows air and circulates air through your buildings. More energy efficient way to circulate the air in your spaces to open windows or use fans for airflow. And also, when we have windows, that means we have the sun's heat coming in. A way to keep the sun from heating our spaces too hot is to lower the window shades to prevent it from coming in. Some more ways to save are to replace or repair poor insulation, duct leaks, dirty filters, evaporators, and condenser coils. With things like insulation, with poor insulation or damaged insulation, heat is lost in places that it's not supposed to be, which makes our whole HVAC systems less efficient. This is also the case with duct leaks. Dirty filters make the fans work harder, which is just a loss of efficiency for the fan because they don't have to work that hard. And then also replacing inefficient cooling and heating equipment. So replacing usually cooling and heating equipment can be somewhat costly, but there are potential rebates that you can get from OUC, which you can check out on their website. By replacing these systems, you will eventually save money through saving energy.
Right. Yeah, I agree. One of the things that is some really low cost or no cost savings is just annually inspecting your system, taking a look at those filters. If it's starting to get blocked up, your fan is going to be working harder because it's having to drive airflow through a dirty, clogged filter. So by replacing that filter, you're lowering the pressure differential in that system, allowing the fan to work more easily and allowing the air to circulate through the building more effectively.
Right. So Ian, I understand you're doing a 55 building audit for the city of Orlando.
Yeah, so as we go through these different ways to save, I've been focused on these across all of our city facilities. So from fire stations to community centers, from the Amway Center to City Hall, my team goes into all of these buildings, over 6 million square feet of facilities, and tries to figure out ways to most effectively save energy. We utilize a energy efficiency bond to finance some of these measures, but a lot of what we do is really low or no cost, and anybody that's involved in the Better Buildings Challenge, or the Battle of the Buildings Challenge rather, can implement some of these measures. So just like talking about changing out your filters, we'll talk about an ASHRAE level audit in a second, and there's a couple of interesting ways that you can discover new opportunities for savings as you're going through that audit process.
Awesome, Ian. Can you tell me a little bit about how you got started in this 55 building audit?
Sure. So one of the things that we did several years ago is we applied for some money from the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, and this allowed us to have a little bit of a seed fund to go through and investigate some of these different ways to save that you looked at. We uncovered several parts of our buildings that haven't been touched or have been kind of ignored over the years, and we were able to save upwards of 25 to 27% in a lot of facilities just by turning things off, just by putting buildings on controls, changing out the thermostats up to a smart thermostat, just like you talked about a few slides ago, and replacing and repairing some ductwork that was allowing for uncontrolled airflow through the spaces. You really want to be able to cool in the places where you have the load and not push cold air through your attic or through your plenum space where nobody is going to be occupying the space.
That's awesome. So with this, with these energy savings, the city should be saving a lot of money. So that's good for everyone, and also, obviously the energy savings also, helps the environment, helps the economy.
Mm-hmm.
So can you talk about maybe some of the specific energy conservation measures that have taken place in some of the buildings that you've audited?
Sure. So one of the things that we've looked at is really digging into the HVAC systems and the building systems. But before we do any upgrades as far as new lights or new air conditioners, we want to make sure that the building envelope is where it needs to be, that there's no gaps or cracks, or the building insulation is adequate and effective. We want to make sure that the windows are not leaking or have any moisture intrusion. So we went around all of our facilities and we did an audit to take a look at all of these aspects. We ended up doing some caulking and some weatherization of facilities. And just by doing some small improvements on that end, we saw a gain in the efficiency of the system or the buildings overall, because now we're not wasting energy air conditioning Central Florida, right? We're not letting it leak out into the exterior. We're keeping that cool air where we want it.
Right. Awesome. Cool. So yeah, that led us right into the envelope considerations. And now,
one of the other things that we did is really looked into LED lighting across all of our facilities. And this is a really low cost, low hanging fruit for a lot of building owners to go after. I mean, on average, LED lights are using a third of the energy of a conventional lighting system to get the same amount or even greater lumens, which is the amount of light output that's going to be seen in the space. So you can reduce it by 60 to 75% just by changing out the fixtures. A lot of times as we go through these buildings, we find that we'll change fixtures, but we won't even need as many fixtures as we had before. So maybe we have a dozen fixtures in a space or a gymnasium or a part of an office building, and now we only have to go back with 8 or 10 because of the increased efficiency and design and light throw of these fixtures. You know, the LED lights are a chip on board technology, so it's only putting the light where you need it, as opposed to a round conventional light where it has up light and down light.
So another consideration is plug loads, and there's a 5-step process for your plug load reductions. That starts with reviewing what you actually need in your spaces. There's sometimes equipment that maybe is unnecessary for what you have, in which case, if it's plugged in, it's using energy. So that's worth considering. And that leads into removing. You want to eliminate or unplug the unnecessary devices that aren't required to be plugged in. Now, with replacing, that has to do with inefficient old technologies that can be replaced with newer, more efficient technologies that can save energy. Reduce, that's powering down your devices when they're not in use, and retrain, or that can really be trained for the first time. That's making sure you understand how all of your equipment works, the best way to use it efficiently, and save energy.
Now let's stay on this slide for just a second, because this is one of the things that is affected by the occupants in the building more so than the building owners, managers, or the facility managers that are tweaking the set points in the air conditioning or changing out the lights. This is really the X factor of the plug load, because all the time I see people plugging in space heaters in the middle of the summer because the room gets a little chilly. And that's really putting a foot on the gas pedal and the brake at the same time. So we want to make sure that we're going through the building, we're identifying exactly what is needed. If somebody has a power strip and it's powering devices, great, but are they powering that down at the end of their shifts or at the end of the night? One of the things that we're doing with City Hall, when we review a floor or install new furniture, half of the outlets in each new cubicle are controlled by the building automation system. And this is actually the new code in ASHRAE 90.1 for major renovations and new construction. So anybody that's doing a major renovation or doing a large office furniture change out is going to be required to implement this. So you're either going to have to use a scheduling system to shut down half of the outlets in your open office space, or use the building automation system to do that. And what this is really doing is it's targeting those what we call vampire loads that are just sucking a little bit of energy all over the building all the time. So even if somebody's not at their computer, it's still backlighting the screen, it's still charging the laptop battery, they may have a little fan on their desk or a light. All those little elements and pieces of equipment add up over time. So we want to make sure that we're reducing that or shutting it down when we're not using it. And again, engaging the staff, making sure they understand why we're doing this, why we're shutting it down, why we're killing all the computers at the end of the shift, to make sure that, hey, this is going to save energy over the long term. Plus, if there is a power surge or if there is something, your equipment is going to be more protected. One of the things that we found when I was working at the Department of Energy is that your cable set-top box, the little thing where your Bright House network is on your TV, that can sometimes draw more energy than your refrigerator. Believe it or not, because it's a vampire load, because it's plugged in and there's not an Energy Star requirement for it, compared to an Energy Star refrigerator, it can actually draw more electricity because it's a constant draw, as opposed to a compressor that kicks on and kicks off. So by targeting those pieces of equipment that are plugged in, you can drastically reduce your plug load. Okay, one of the other things that we want to take a look at is our service hot water considerations. So with several of our buildings across the city, we've gone in, opened up mechanical room doors and seen 90 kilowatt electric resistance heaters for a community center. You know, we don't need 200 gallons of standby hot water when there's not a commercial kitchen in the space. So we've taken those out and a lot of times replaced them with a solar hot water unit, which is great, uses the passive solar heating from the sun to heat the hot water, and a small recirculating pump to pump that through the building with a storage tank. The other things that we've done is included heat pump water heaters at all of the fire stations. This was a great implementation model because we took a existing building that had a high demand. These guys live in there, they're washing dishes, they're taking showers. So there's a lot of demand for hot water. But instead of using electric resistance and not having the option of using gas, we went with a hybrid heat pump water heater. And what this does is it uses heat pump technology, and it actually has about a half a ton or 3/4 of a ton of cooling. So it will actually cool a space like a heat pump or an air conditioner would. And then the output of that process is the heat. And instead of rejecting that heat outside like a condensing unit, it rejects the heat to a storage tank to make hot water. So it's a good win-win process for cooling a space, whether it's a small garage or a semi-unoccupied space, or even in a mechanical room that vents to an occupied space. It's going to provide a little bit more cooling, and it's going to provide heating for that building. Definitely look at gas if you have an on-demand system and you have gas service. Electric can be great too. However, you need a larger electric service, and you really got to take a look at your considerations if you need that on-demand electric service, because it's going to be a little bit more expensive. You're going to pay a little bit more for the kW. And I would really advise folks that if you don't need to make a change, or if you have a recent hot water heater that you're not looking to remove, go ahead and get one of those thermal blankets for it. Just making sure that it's drained annually or serviced properly, and you have a thermal blanket wrapping around it, it's going to get a little bit more performance, and it's not going to have that standby heat loss that you see with a hot water heater that just sits there for most of the day, irradiating that heat out into the space. So the big monster in a lot of the buildings, especially in Florida, is our HVAC. Our air conditioning load is substantial compared to a lot of the other loads in the building. So we really dive in and try to right-size systems and cool where it's needed, especially in the summer. So we're not cooling areas of the building that are not occupied or don't need to be conditioned. So making sure that you're designing for the conditions that you're really going to be using. If it doesn't need to be 72 degrees, if it's only a semi-occupied warehouse, you can crank it up a little bit, just like Dan was saying earlier. Make sure you have high efficiency motors. Make sure your demand controlled ventilation, if you have that, is working properly. And what I mean by demand controlled ventilation is if we have hot, humid outside air that needs to be brought into a building to satisfy ASHRAE 62.1, to satisfy your building code requirements, make sure that you're only bringing in enough of that air that you need to, right? So if you have a conference room or if you have a large office space, you're going to need to bring in that outside air. You need to treat it. You need to wring out the moisture through your HVAC system, but that costs a lot of money. It's a lot of energy to be able to do that. But if you don't have a lot of people in the space, or it's a conference room that's not being used, you should be able to back down that outside air system so that you're reducing the load on your HVAC system. So this brings us to energy audits, right? Why do we do an energy audit? What's the point of going into a building or having a professional that understands the process to go through and really identify what's going on in your facility? How is that better than just a building owner or a manager that knows the building going through it? I would strongly advise everybody to take a look at it. It's a standardized industry process for having an ASHRAE building audit. There is a template to go through, and there's different levels as well. So with ASHRAE level 1, 2, and 3 audits, there's a distinct differentiation between the two. We want to be able to improve the energy performance of the buildings, and we really want to discover low-cost opportunities for savings. So this is a discovery. It's an investigation of, okay, we're getting a third party in here. We're getting fresh eyes into the building. What are they going to see that I'm missing? How am I going to be able to uncover more savings, especially that low-hanging fruit of low and no-cost saving? That's so important. So as part of the energy audit, we're going to establish our current usage and get a baseline for the building to make sure that we can parse out how much our HVAC system is using, how much that lighting demand is putting on the building and on that energy bill, and start to identify some of the energy conservation measures and possibly how much are they going to cost? What is that going to be as an impact to my facility? Is there a 5-year payback? Is there a 2-year payback? An energy audit will be able to tell you where and when you're losing efficiencies and how is the best way to implement those energy savings. So the levels of the ASHRAE energy audit. For a level 1, this is a walkthrough. You're going to get somebody in the building that's going to take a look at all of your systems, take an inventory of the space, understand your lighting demand, understand your HVAC systems, model the age, operating efficiency, and how that compares to other buildings of your same peer base. So that's going to start to get what you need to plug that into your Energy Star portfolio and really develop that baseline. For a level 2 energy audit, and this is what we do and specify for the city, that includes everything in level 1 and a more detailed energy survey and analysis. So that's going to have some stronger calculations. It's going to be a more robust analysis of what's going on into the facility. This is really leading us into level 3, where we're going to have an investment grade analysis that you should be able to take to your CFO or your board and say, look, this is the engineer's calculations that says how much it's going to cost to install, an estimated price, a really accurate understanding of the payback period, and all the information that you need to take that to the policymakers or to the decision makers to be able to implement a larger capital improvement project. So this is just a little bit deeper dive into the ASHRAE methodology through level 1, 2, and 3 audits. Like I said, level 1 is a walkthrough of facility. It's kind of uncovering the major obvious issues, high-level review of the utility data. It's kind of taking into account a year-over-year or month-to-month usage. And it's going to be able to give you what you need to plug that into Energy Star and start seeing some energy saving opportunities or energy conservation measures, as we call them, ECM. Moving through to level 3, that's all the way at the other end of the spectrum, where we have a very calibrated, accurized building model that reflects in your energy software that an engineer is working on how that building is going to be performing and be able to tweak a proposed energy conservation measure. So at the level 3 side, they're going to have a building model that will be built, and it's going to be reflective of the actual consumption that that building is using year over year. So we'll be able to go into the model and say, okay, what if we change the air conditioning system? How would that affect the building? What if we change the lighting system and we put this type of light in? What if we replaced or refinished the roof with a new solar reflective roof or a vegetative roof? How would that affect the energy performance? You'll be able to get real results that can help inform an investment for the actual building. This is the ASHRAE manual that dictates the commercial building energy audit process. I strongly encourage folks that are involved in this process, or building owners and managers or facility managers, to be familiar with it. Get a copy of it. It's a paperback. It's not a heavy or expensive book. And start to understand, hey, what are some of the things that I can start to look at? Can I start to do a level 1 audit with my building or my team and really say, okay, let's go through here. Let's have a template. Let's use the methodology to identify what's going on in our facilities. One of the things that I wanted to really reinforce and share with you guys is, as a part of my effort to go through the city, we are trying to live up to the mayor's GreenWorks initiatives. And Mayor Buddy Dyer is very strong and progressive, leading at the tip of the spear. He says the city of Orlando has worked to become one of the most sustainable cities in America, and we are committed to building partnerships and sharing resources that foster positive environmental changes. So as part of my job with the city, I'm going through all of the city facilities. We're trying to uncover, using ASHRAE level 1 and 2 audits, we're trying to uncover opportunities for savings. We're implementing LED retrofit projects. We're implementing HVAC systems, increased efficiency of HVAC systems. And a lot of what we're doing is building automation. So bringing this all together in one pot so we can see what's going on, we can understand the total cost of ownership of our facility. We're making sure that the buildings are working as effectively as possible, and we're making sure that we're not missing any of those low-cost, no-cost opportunities for savings. And I think that's one of the most important things that we can do. Definitely help you get some points on the board very quickly as far as your buildings that you've entered into the competition, to make sure you're capturing some of those as we go through.
Yeah. So going back to the energy audits that you're doing, can you go into detail on some of the ECMs that you've implemented on the buildings that you've audited?
Yeah, so one of the ones that we recently finished up and I'm most proud of is the Amway Center. And I'm looking at it right across the street right now. We recently did a LED lighting retrofit, and I totally understand. I don't think anybody else has entered a stadium into the competition. So it might not apply to everybody that's on the line, but we went through the building. We did an ASHRAE Level 2 audit. We used the same methodology that we're talking about here, and we tried to understand where we could get the most bang for the buck payback. We really identified, even though this is a fairly new building built in 2010, we identified the lighting system as a very large source of energy consumption. It's used a ton, over 200 events a year, both the sports lighting in the catwalk and the non-sports lighting along the concourses, the concession areas, the back of house, front of house spaces, uses a substantial amount of energy. So we went through, we identified fixtures that we wanted to replace it with. We went out to bid, and we recently finished a project to replace all the sports lighting and all the non-sports lighting. That's going to save almost $300,000 a year just at that one facility. So not even touching the HVAC system yet, we're already saving almost $300,000 a year. And I know that's a gross example. It's a large building. It's almost 1 million square feet. But it's using the same methodology that anybody can use for office buildings or restaurants to go through and say, okay, how am I using energy now? And how can I more effectively use electricity to power my building? One of the other things that we've done is go through our community centers and fire stations and make sure that they're on building automated controls or using a smart thermostat, so that when the population of those buildings is transient or the firefighters leave for a call and they're gone for a couple hours, that we're not continuing to cool that building to that desired set point until they get back into the building. So it's going to go into a setback mode. It'll start creeping up to 74, 76, 78 degrees, but it won't go above that. It won't entirely turn off until they come back into the firehouse and the occupancy sensors sense that they're there, and then it's going to crank that back down to their desired set point.
Wow, that's awesome, man. With all these energy conservation measures, it really seems that most every part of it is just positive. Are there any negatives to doing things like putting in LED lighting or replacing your HVAC system? It really seems like everything is all good.
I mean, it's a pretty effective process, but I want to stress that it's helpful to keep an open mind. You know, I understand that we've had a lot of buildings, and it's tough to maintain a building to the highest level. We all have buildings, and we all have to make a decision of what's going to get done this month or this quarter or this fiscal year, right? So some things fall by the wayside. Things get prioritized lower on the list, and that's understandable. Everybody has to make those adjustments and make those cuts, and sometimes things don't get done. But by going in and having a strict template of, hey, this is an energy audit, this is what we're going to do, we're going to look at all of these things, even if I know that it's an issue, or even if I know that my team or another team at the city has kind of put that at the back burner for a few years, let's still put it on the list. Let's still try to understand what the opportunity is for savings that we're missing out on. Because if you're looking at everything holistically all on one page, you may be able to better reallocate resources or bring it to the attention of somebody else that can help add to the resources that you're working with. So this is really just putting more tools in your toolbox and helping the facility managers able to more accurately and more effectively save energy across their buildings. Yeah. Awesome. Well, great. Dan, great job. I certainly appreciate the questions. I wanted to kind of pivot and see if there's any questions from the audience as we wrap up our slideshow. So you're more than welcome to either type a question on the chat bar or just speak on the phone, and I'll try to answer any questions you may have, either about some of the energy conservation measures we've talked about today, or any of the work that the city of Orlando is doing to try to save energy.
We'll wait a couple minutes. In the meantime, as we're thinking through a question, first and foremost, Dan and Ian, I wanted to really thank you for your time. The information you shared today was incredibly useful, I think, for everybody on the line to learn more about what we can do. And it's amazing that there are so many components within our buildings, from the envelope to the lighting. You talked about HVAC, plug load, service hot water, and many other major assets that essentially are the consumers of energy within our buildings. And you also touched on a lot of low and even no cost improvements, things like changing your set points or improving using more natural lighting, occupancy light sensors, things like that are relatively low cost, but end up adding up over time to save significant amounts of money on utility bills, and of course reducing energy and other resources. So it's wonderful to see that there's a lot of diversity in what we can be doing, and hopefully you all as participants can take and glean some of this information and start to implement them over the course of the challenge and moving forward. I want to encourage you all, obviously, to continue to stay informed. And again, if you haven't already signed up, please do so at that website that you see there, again, cfbotb.org, or you can email us at that email there. And we are hosting this webinar series every single month over the course of the next 6 months, changing topics to essentially support you all in saving other things such as water and waste as well. And so our next topic, if you want to save the date now, will be August 16th, again at 9 a.m. on the same webinar link, and it'll be focused on water saving solutions and tips, really focused on how we could really look at unique water saving initiatives within our buildings that are both low and no cost as well. So let me see if there's any other questions. Here's a question that's coming in.
Yep. The question is Robert. He asked, does the city allow the savings to fund further energy conservation measures? And that's a great question. In fact, one of the things that we set up when we received a small funding from the Recovery Act back in 2013 was a revolving energy fund. So the savings from those initial implemented energy conservation measures has funded a revolving energy fund that we've used for solar hot water heaters at community centers or other energy conservation measures across the city. But one of the things that we're doing now with this larger bond project I mentioned is capturing all of the savings, and we're trying to achieve more savings than we need to pay down the debt on the bond. The bond is a loan, and we need to be able to pay back this loan, right? So we're shooting to double the amount that we need to pay down the deficit. And the remainder will actually go towards paying the construction costs for the new police headquarters, a LEED police headquarters right over there at OBT. And I did want to remind our listeners that we're going to be hosting a tour of the new Orlando Police Headquarters next week. And you can find that on the USGBC website, Central Florida USGBC. You can sign up. It's a free tour, and we'll have the architect, the engineer of record, and the contractor giving us a tour of the ins and outs of the new police headquarters. So that should be very cool.
And we also have a question from Mark Kavanaugh to Chris, and that is, what tools do you use to calculate the amount of savings per each energy conservation measure? For example, cost versus energy savings, simple payback, etc.
Right. So we use a combination of methods, and actually this is Ian. I'm going to go ahead and answer that since I go through and develop a roadmap for all of our buildings that we've identified that have a high energy use intensity. We use that energy use intensity, or watts per square foot, as kind of a first run through our facilities to determine the biggest users as we go through. And then how are we going to use the energy audits to help inform the energy conservation measures we want to pull the trigger with and go forward at each of these buildings. I have all of these in a large Excel spreadsheet. That's really my roadmap for implementing the measures. But we also utilize a energy modeling software, IESVE Pro, and that enables us to accurize an energy model for the larger, more complex buildings. For instance, City Hall or the Amway Center. That's going to be a little bit more complex than some of the office buildings that we have across the city. So For some of the smaller buildings, I can look at the power bills, establish a baseline, do a takeoff of the lighting systems, understand what we're going to go back with, watts in, watts out, get a simple payback, and move on from there. But say if we're going to be doing a large HVAC retrofit or a building automation retrocommissioning project at a complex building, I'm going to try to use a energy modeling software to help make those calculations more accurate.
Ian, I wanted to add to there, this is Chris, that using the Energy Star Portfolio Manager tool, that essentially is the tracking tool of this whole challenge, is also it's a free way for us to track the performance of our buildings over time, and you can use it as essentially a measurement and verification tool. There are ways of setting goals, and in Energy Star, you can also set improvements that you're making to your building, and it will start to track and actually provide graphics to you that will show you how much you saved because of the lighting improvement, or how much you saved because you increased that set point, or you lowered that, or you removed that plug load from a certain facility. So using Energy Star is really the proven best practice strategy for buildings across the country that is free of charge. It's online, it's very easy to access, and it's very easy to utilize, quite frankly. And it's a big reason why we've used it as the core tool for this challenge. So we encourage you, obviously, to plug your facilities into that as part of the challenge, but also moving forward beyond this 6-month challenge. This is something that buildings are using on a monthly basis to track their financials, to track their improvements. And the last thing I'll mention is that both utilities, Duke Energy and OUC, who are sponsors of this program, offer free energy assessments for your building. They are not full ASHRAE level 2s, but they certainly walk through the facility. They look at all 5 major building components that we've been talking about, and they provide some very high level payback and ROI calculations on potential improvements that you can make, in addition to rebates and incentives that they offer to make those improvements. So I know, speaking for OUC, I do know that they have a custom incentive program for any building that's a customer of theirs to make improvements. And the cool thing is you can include controls into that. You can customize that for lighting improvements or HVAC improvements. And there are some significant rebates that you can get for improving your buildings, and at the same time driving up that net operating income as a building owner and manager, and lowering that net operating expense at the end of the day.
Right, and this is definitely what we use as a city to, as far as transparency, benchmarking, and reporting, to show across all of our commitments how our buildings are performing. Great. So Chris, thanks for really getting into that and explaining the Energy Star and its importance. Anybody else on the line have any questions? No?
Like you answered them all, Ian and Dan. Again, I wanted to thank the both of you for your time this morning. We really appreciate sharing the knowledge and spreading the good word. If you have any questions from anything you heard today and want to connect with Ian and Dan, definitely email that email address at the bottom of this slide, sophia.cf.usgbc@gmail.com, and we can certainly relay you over to the both of them. We hope this was informative, and really appreciate you taking out your morning to learn more about how to save energy. Again, one more time, next month, August 16th at 9 a.m., same link, we will be having a webinar on water-saving solutions and tips for your building, and hope that you can join us and help us spread the word to your members and your peers. Have a wonderful week.
Thanks, everyone.